In the vast, uncharted reaches of space, a desperate cry for help echoes through the stars. A peaceful civilization built on harmony and knowledge faces annihilation at the hands of the ruthless void-born empire. The Zephyrians, crystalline beings from a paradise world, send out a last-ditch SOS, their fate hanging in the balance. But in a galaxy full of advanced species, there's only one race they fear, one race who has earned a terrifying reputation across the cosmos, the humans. But the question remains. Why is sending an SOS to Deathworlders the worst idea you could have? The desperate call. The crystal spires of Zephyria Prime caught the morning light and scattered it into countless rainbows across the peaceful city. Ambassador Lyric stood on her observation platform, watching the daily harmony ritual as millions of her people synchronized their bioluminescent patterns in perfect unity. The Zephyrians had evolved from crystalline formations on their paradise world, developing into beings of living light and organic crystal. Their entire civilization was built around balance, scientific discovery, and artistic expression. For over 3,000 cycles, the Zephyrians had known only peace. Their world provided everything they needed. The temperature never varied more than a few degrees. Natural disasters were unknown. Predators had never existed on their gentle planet. They had grown into a species of philosophers, scientists, and artists who spent their days pursuing knowledge and beauty. Lyrics adjusted her translucent form, the soft blue glow of her consciousness pulsing gently through her crystalline structure. As the chief ambassador of the Galactic Council, she had studied thousands of species across the known galaxy. She understood that her people were unique in their complete lack of violence or aggression. It was something they took pride in, believing that true civilization meant leaving behind the primitive instincts of survival and conflict. The morning's tranquility shattered when the sky began to darken. Massive shapes blotted out their twin suns as an enormous fleet descended from the void of space. The ships were unlike anything in Zephyrian records. Black as deep space and bristling with weapon arrays, they moved with predatory grace toward the planet's surface. General Korth stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Destroyer of Worlds, studying the peaceful planet below through hungry eyes. The Voidborn Empire had conquered 47 systems in the past century, but none had offered such valuable prizes. Intelligence reports confirmed that Zephyria Prime contained the largest deposits of quantum crystals in known space. These crystals could power their war machine for 1,000 years. The Voidborn had evolved in the harsh void between galaxies, their bodies adapted to survive in the vacuum of space itself. They were beings of dark energy and shadow, sustained by consuming the life force of other worlds. To them, peaceful civilizations were not something to admire, but resources to be harvested. "Begin the harvesting protocol," Korth commanded in his voice like grinding metal. "I want those crystals extracted within 7 standard days. Any resistance is to be eliminated immediately." The first bombardment struck Zephyria Prime's major cities without warning. Energy beams that could melt mountains turned crystalline spires into rivers of molten glass. The Zephyrians had never built weapons or shields because they had never needed them. Their defense systems were designed to deflect asteroids and cosmic debris, utterly useless against military-grade weapons. Lyrics watched in horror as her beautiful city crumbled around her. The harmony ritual dissolved into chaos as her people fled in panic, their gentle forms unable to comprehend the violence raining down from the sky. The Zephyrians had no military, no weapons, no understanding of warfare. They were lambs facing wolves, and the wolves were hungry. Within hours, half of Zephyria Prime's major population centers lay in ruins. The Voidborn landing craft touched down in the crystal fields, and dark soldiers began the systematic harvesting of the planet's treasures. They worked with mechanical efficiency, showing no emotion as they destroyed everything the Zephyrians had built over millennia. Lyrics made her way to the emergency command center deep beneath the planet's surface. The underground facility had been designed as a research station, but now served as a desperate refuge for the surviving government leaders. Chancellor Mirren, the eldest of their kind, pulsed with dim, terrified light as she addressed the gathered survivors. "Our preliminary estimates suggest we have perhaps 10 days before they complete their harvesting operation," Chancellor Mirren announced, her crystalline voice cracking with emotion. "After that, they will likely destroy what remains of our world to eliminate any witnesses." "What about our allies in the Galactic Council?" asked Science Minister Vex. "Surely they will come to our aid when they learn of this attack." Lyrics's form darkened with despair. She had already sent messages to every member species of the Galactic Council, pleading for immediate military assistance. The responses had been swift and uniformly negative. The peaceful trading partners who had welcomed Zephyrian art and scientific discoveries suddenly had urgent business elsewhere when it came to actually fighting for Zephyrian survival. The Council species will not risk war with the Voidborn Empire, Lyrics reported. They suggest we negotiate a peaceful settlement or consider evacuation to other worlds. The bitter irony was not lost on any of them. Their commitment to peace, which they had always considered their greatest strength, had left them utterly defenseless. Worse, it had made their allies view them as acceptable losses, rather than civilizations worth defending. There must be someone, Chancellor Mirren whispered. Some species in the galaxy that will stand with us against this evil. Lyrics activated the Central Communications Array and began broadcasting a desperate plea across all known frequencies. The message was simple and heartbreaking. This is Ambassador Lyrics of the Zephyrian Republic. Our world is under attack by the Voidborn Empire. Our people are dying. We have no weapons, no military, no way to defend ourselves. Please, if anyone in the galaxy can hear this message, we beg for your help. We are a peaceful people who have never harmed anyone. We do not deserve to die like this. Please, someone help us. The message went out across hundreds of star systems carried by quantum communication networks to every corner of known space. Most species received it and immediately deleted it from their systems. The Voidborn Empire was too powerful to oppose, and the Zephyrians were too weak to save. Getting involved would only bring destruction to their own worlds. But in a small exploration vessel on the edge of the galaxy, Commander Sarah Chen of the Human Deep Space Survey received the message and felt something stir in her chest that had nothing to do with political calculations or strategic considerations. She was 43 years old, a veteran of humanity's expansion into space, and had seen enough of the galaxy to know that true evil existed among the stars. Chen stood on the bridge of the HSV Wanderer, a mid-sized exploration ship with a crew of 200 humans. They had been charting unvisited systems for the past 8 months, part of humanity's ongoing mission to understand their place in the wider galaxy. The human species was relatively new to galactic civilization, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 70 years ago. What made humans unique among galactic species was their origin world. Earth was classified in galactic databases as a Class X death world, a planet so hostile to life that most aliens considered it uninhabitable. The gravity was crushing, the weather was violent, the native life forms were aggressive predators, and the entire ecosystem was based on competition and survival of the fittest. Most galactic species had evolved on gentle worlds with stable climates and peaceful ecosystems. They had developed intelligence as a way to better understand and appreciate their environments. Humans had developed intelligence as a weapon in an ongoing war against a planet that was actively trying to kill them every single day. This fundamental difference meant that humans were viewed with a mixture of fear and fascination by other species. They were incredibly strong by galactic standards, having evolved under gravity that would crush most aliens. They were remarkably resilient, able to survive injuries and environmental conditions that would kill other beings. Most disturbing to peaceful species, humans retained all their predatory instincts even after achieving advanced civilization. "Commander," called Lieutenant Zhang from the communications station. "I'm receiving a distress signal from the Zephyrian system. It's a general broadcast asking for help against something called the Voidborn Empire." Chen frowned as she reviewed the message. She had heard of the Zephyrians from trade reports. They were known as master artists and scientists, creators of some of the most beautiful works in galactic culture. They were also completely pacifist, having never developed any form of military technology. "Any response from other species?" Chen asked. "None, Commander. The message has been broadcasting for 6 hours with no replies. Wait, I'm getting some secondary chatter on Council frequencies. It looks like several species are actively warning others to stay away from the situation." Dr. Martinez, the ship's chief science officer, accessed the galactic database on her tablet. "Commander, I'm reading some concerning information about the Voidborn Empire. They're listed as a conquest-oriented civilization that has destroyed dozens of peaceful worlds. They seem to target species that can't fight back." Chen studied the tactical display showing the Zephyrian system. It was 3 days away at maximum warp, well within their ship's range. She thought about the desperate voice in that message, pleading for someone, anyone, to care enough to help. She thought about an entire civilization of peaceful beings facing extinction while the galaxy turned its back. "Dr. Martinez," Chen said quietly, "access our files on human military history. How many times have we interfered to protect weaker groups from stronger aggressors?" Martinez smiled grimly as she pulled up the files. "Approximately 4,000 documented cases in recorded history, Commander. It appears to be a consistent pattern in human behavior. Chen nodded. She had expected that answer. Something in human nature compelled them to protect the innocent, even at great cost to themselves. It was a trait that other species found both admirable and terrifying. Humans would fight hopeless battles and make tremendous sacrifices for people they had never met, simply because it was the right thing to do. Mr. Zhang, send a response to the Zephyrian distress call. Tell them that the Human Deep Space Survey has received their message and is en route to provide assistance. The bridge crew turned to stare at their commander. They all understood the implications of her decision. They were a single exploration ship going up against an empire that had conquered dozens of worlds. By any rational calculation, they were sailing toward their own destruction. "Commander," asked Navigator Williams, "what's our plan when we arrive? We're not a military vessel. We have basic defensive systems and a crew trained for exploration, not combat." Chen smiled, and there was something in that expression that reminded everyone on the bridge that humans were the apex predators of a death world. "Mr. Williams, we're going to do what humans have always done when innocent people need protection. We're going to fight." As the HSV Wanderer changed course toward the Zephyrian system, none of the crew realized they were about to teach the galaxy why sending an SOS to Deathworlders was both the most dangerous and most hopeful thing a species could do. The humans were coming, and they were bringing all the fury and determination of a world that had tried to kill them for millions of years. The shocking reality. The HSV Wanderer dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyrian system to find a scene of systematic destruction. Debris from shattered crystal spires drifted through space while massive void-borne harvesting platforms stripped the planet's surface bare. Emergency beacons flashed weakly from the few remaining population centers, their automated distress calls lost in the chaos of conquest. Commander Chen stood on the bridge, studying the tactical display with professional detachment. The void-borne fleet consisted of over 40 heavy cruisers and twice as many support vessels. Against this overwhelming force, her single exploration ship appeared laughably inadequate. Any sane species would have calculated the odds, realized the futility of intervention, and quietly retreated. Humans, however, had never been accused of being entirely sane. "Dr. Martinez, what can you tell me about Zephyrian biology?" Chen asked as she planned their approach. Martinez consulted her database with growing amazement. "Commander, they're even more fragile than initial reports suggested. Their bodies are primarily crystalline structures with an average density about 1/3 that of human bone. They evolved in 0.6 Earth gravity with perfectly stable weather patterns. A fall that would give a human a minor bruise could shatter their entire torso. Environmental tolerances? Extremely narrow. They require precise temperature and atmospheric conditions to survive. Exposure to anything outside their comfort zone would be fatal within minutes. They've literally never experienced physical hardship of any kind." Chen nodded grimly. This explained why no other species had responded to the Zephyrian distress call. In galactic terms, the crystalline beings were considered too delicate to save. The environmental conditions created by war, radiation, toxic atmospheric changes, structural collapses, would kill them as surely as enemy weapons. But humans had evolved in environments that other species would classify as lethal disaster zones. They had learned to operate in extremes of temperature, pressure, and atmospheric composition that would instantly kill most galactic life forms. What made rescue impossible for other species was just another day's work for Death World natives. "Lieutenant Zhang, open a channel to the largest Zephyrian emergency beacon." The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of what appeared to be an underground shelter. The being who faced them was tall and graceful, her translucent body pulsing with soft blue light. Ambassador Lyrics looked exhausted and terrified, her usual radiance dimmed by despair. "Unknown vessel," Lyrics spoke in her musical voice. "Please identify yourself. Are you here to assist with evacuation efforts?" "Ambassador Lyrics, I'm Commander Sarah Chen of the Human Deep Space Survey. We received your distress call and have come to help." Lyrics' form flickered with confusion. "Humans? But your species is listed as inhabiting a Class X world. Our databases indicate that your planet is too dangerous for civilized contact." Chen smiled wryly. "Those databases are correct, Ambassador. That's exactly why we're the ones who answered your call." Before Lyrics could respond, proximity alarms began blaring throughout the shelter. On the view screen, they could see void-borne assault craft descending toward the underground facility. The crystalline beings around Lyrics began to panic, their light patterns flashing in distress as they realized their hiding place had been discovered. "Ambassador, we're detecting multiple hostile contacts approaching your position," Chen reported. "How long until they breach your facility?" "Perhaps 20 minutes with their current equipment," Lyrics replied, her voice breaking. Commander, there are over 10,000 civilians in this shelter, including younglings who cannot survive evacuation. We are trapped with no way to defend ourselves. Chen activated the ship's intercom system. All hands, this is the commander. We have 10,000 civilian lives depending on us in the next 20 minutes. I need volunteers for an emergency ground assault. Anyone not comfortable with high-risk combat operations should remain aboard ship. The response was immediate and unanimous. Every single member of the crew volunteered for the mission. This was not because they were trained soldiers or because they had personal stakes in the outcome. It was because they were human, and humans had a genetic-level compulsion to protect innocent people from harm. Master Sergeant Davis led the first wave of human Marines toward the Zephyrian shelter. His team consisted of 12 humans equipped with standard exploration gear hastily modified for combat operations. They were not elite soldiers, but scientists, engineers, and survey specialists who had decided that some things were more important than their own safety. The Voidborn assault force consisted of 50 heavily armed warriors equipped with power armor and energy weapons. They were professional soldiers of an empire that had conquered dozens of worlds. By any reasonable calculation, 12 humans with improvised equipment had no chance against such overwhelming odds. The Voidborn had not accounted for what it meant to fight beings evolved on a death world. Davis and his team moved through the toxic atmosphere of the bombed-out surface with casual efficiency. The radiation levels that would have killed most species in minutes barely registered on their environmental suits. The unstable terrain created by the bombardment was navigated with the unconscious skill of beings whose ancestors had survived earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and ice ages. When the first Voidborn patrol encountered the humans, they expected to face enemy soldiers similar to themselves. Beings who fought according to established military doctrine, who retreated when overwhelmed, who valued their own lives above abstract principles. Instead, they met predators. Corporal Williams eliminated 3 Voidborn warriors in the first 30 seconds of contact using tactics that no civilized species would consider. While the enemy sought cover and tried to establish firing positions, Williams simply charged directly at them through their weapons fire, accepting hits that would have been fatal to other species and closing to hand-to-hand range where human strength and speed gave him devastating advantages. Sergeant Kim flanked the enemy position by climbing a vertical rock face that the Voidborn had considered impassable. Her ancestors had spent millions of years learning to hunt in 3 dimensions, and that evolutionary heritage served her well as she attacked from an angle the enemy could not have anticipated. The Voidborn patrol was eliminated within 6 minutes. More disturbing to their commanders, the humans continued advancing toward their objective even after taking casualties that should have ended their assault. Private Chen completed the mission with a severed arm and internal injuries that would have killed most species, refusing medical evacuation until the civilians were secure. Ambassador Lyrics watched through the shelter's external cameras as 12 humans systematically destroyed a force of 50 professional soldiers. The crystalline beings around her stared in silent shock at the violence they were witnessing. They had never seen anything like it because nothing like it existed anywhere else in the civilized galaxy. "Commander Chen," Lyrics whispered, "your people are fighting with a ferocity that defies comprehension. They show no fear even when severely wounded." Chen's voice came through the communicator with calm professionalism. "Ambassador, my people evolved on a world where showing fear or backing down from a fight meant death. Those instincts don't just disappear because we achieve spaceflight." The human assault teams reached the shelter entrance and began the evacuation process. This presented an entirely new set of challenges that revealed even more startling differences between the species. The Zephyrians required precise environmental conditions to survive, but the surface of their world had been poisoned by the bombardment. Moving them through the toxic atmosphere should have been impossible. Dr. Martinez established a field medical station using equipment designed for studying hostile environments. To her amazement, she discovered that atmospheric conditions which were lethal to Zephyrians were barely hazardous by human standards. Earth's industrial age had exposed humanity to similar toxins for centuries, building resistance that other species completely lacked. "Medical team to all evacuation units," Martinez broadcast. "Humans will handle all surface transport operations. Zephyrian civilians cannot survive more than 3 minutes in current atmospheric conditions." The evacuation became a showcase of human physical capabilities. Sergeant Davis carried 12 Zephyrian children at once, a feat of strength that would have been impossible for any other species. The children weighed almost nothing by human standards, but their fragile forms required careful handling to prevent injury. Private Martinez ran continuous relay operations between the shelter and the evacuation shuttles, covering distances in toxic atmospheric conditions that would have been fatal to other rescue teams. Her endurance levels, normal for a human who had grown up running marathons in Earth's crushing gravity, were beyond the comprehension of species who had evolved on gentler worlds. As the rescue operations continued, word spread through void-born command channels about the strange new enemy they faced. General Korth received reports that made no sense according to standard military analysis. A single ship with 200 crew members was somehow evacuating 10,000 civilians while simultaneously fighting off assault forces that should have overwhelmed them with ease. "General," reported Commander Vex, "our ground forces are requesting immediate reinforcement. They claim to be facing an enemy that does not respond to standard combat tactics." Korth studied the tactical displays with growing confusion. "Explain, does not respond to standard tactics, Commander." "Sir, the enemy continues fighting even after taking casualties that should be fatal. They show no fear of death and appear to prioritize mission completion over their own survival. Our forces have never encountered anything like this." Korth accessed the galactic database to research this species that called itself human. What he found disturbed him more than he wanted to admit. Earth was classified as a Class X death world, a planet so hostile that most species considered it uninhabitable. The fact that intelligent life had not only survived there but achieved spacefaring civilization was unprecedented in galactic history. More concerning were the psychological profiles. Humans retained all the aggressive instincts of apex predators while possessing the intelligence and technology of an advanced civilization. They were described as a species that would fight hopeless battles for abstract principles, that would sacrifice their own lives to protect strangers, that viewed overwhelming odds as challenges rather than reasons to retreat. For the first time since beginning the conquest of Zephyria Prime, General Korth felt something approaching uncertainty. Meanwhile, the evacuation continued with remarkable efficiency. Commander Chen had divided her crew into specialized teams that operated with the kind of seamless coordination that could only come from a species evolved to work together under extreme pressure. The communications team maintained contact with scattered civilian groups across the planet. The engineering team rapidly constructed temporary shelters that could protect Zephyrian refugees from the poisoned atmosphere. The medical team treated injuries that ranged from human combat wounds to Zephyrian trauma from environmental exposure. Ambassador Lyrics found herself working directly with the human teams, serving as liaison and translator for her people. The experience was unlike anything in her previous diplomatic career. These beings worked with a focused intensity that was both impressive and slightly terrifying. They made life-or-death decisions without hesitation, accepted enormous personal risks as routine parts of their job, and maintained their effectiveness even under conditions that would have incapacitated most species. "Commander Chen," Lyric said during a brief pause in the operations, "I must ask you something that has been troubling me. Your people are risking everything to save strangers you have never met. What do you hope to gain from this sacrifice?" Chen looked up from her tactical display, genuinely puzzled by the question. "Ambassador, we're not hoping to gain anything. Your people needed help, so we came to help them. That's just what humans do." "But surely your species expects some form of compensation for such extraordinary service?" "The compensation is knowing that innocent people are safe," Chen replied simply. "That's enough for us." As the evacuation entered its final phase, it became clear that the operation had been an unprecedented success. Over 10,000 Zephyrian civilians had been safely transported to human vessels where they were being cared for in specially constructed environmental chambers. The void-born forces that had seemed overwhelming just hours earlier had been systematically eliminated by human teams operating with tactical brilliance and physical capabilities that defied galactic understanding. But the real shock was still to come. As news of the human intervention spread through galactic communication networks, species across the galaxy began to realize that everything they thought they knew about Earth's inhabitants was wrong. These were not the monsters that their databases described. These were beings who would cross the galaxy to protect strangers, who would fight impossible odds for people they had never met, who would sacrifice their own lives to save others. The galaxy was about to learn why you never send an SOS to Deathworlders, not because they won't come, but because once they do, everything changes forever. Part 3. The Galactic Legend. General Korth stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching tactical displays that showed an impossible situation developing. Over the past 18 hours, a single human exploration vessel had evacuated 40,000 Zephyrian civilians while simultaneously decimating his ground forces. His professional military mind struggled to comprehend how 200 beings from a backwater death world were outperforming his empire's elite warriors. "Sir," reported Commander Vex, "we've lost contact with 12 assault teams. Long-range sensors indicate the humans have established a defensive perimeter around the remaining civilian centers that our forces cannot penetrate." Korth studied the battlefield analysis with growing frustration. Human tactics made no sense according to established military doctrine. They fought as individuals rather than formal units, adapting their strategies moment by moment based on changing conditions. When overwhelmed, they didn't retreat to regroup, they simply fought harder. When faced with impossible odds, they found ways to make the impossible merely difficult. Most disturbing was their complete disregard for acceptable casualty rates. Galactic military wisdom held that forces should withdraw when suffering more than 15% losses. Human teams continued fighting at full effectiveness even after losing half their members. They treated what other species would consider devastating defeats as minor setbacks to work around. "General," Commander Vex continued, "our intelligence division has completed their analysis of human military history. The results are concerning." Korth accessed the intelligence files and immediately understood why his forces were struggling. Humanity's historical records showed over 5,000 years of continuous warfare. They had fought each other with progressively more sophisticated weapons while simultaneously battling their planet's hostile environment. They were a species that had literally weaponized everything they encountered, turning tools, animals, weather patterns, and even disease into instruments of war. But what truly set them apart was their philosophical approach to conflict. Other species fought for territory, resources, or dominance. Humans routinely fought for abstract concepts like freedom, justice, and protection of the innocent. They would endure tremendous suffering for principles that most species would abandon at the first sign of difficulty. "Sir," interrupted the communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the human vessel. They're requesting to speak with you directly." The main screen activated to show the interior of the human ship's bridge. Commander Chen appeared calm and professional, showing none of the exhaustion or stress that should have been evident after 18 hours of continuous combat operations. Behind her, Korth could see human crew members working at their stations with the same focused efficiency they had maintained throughout the crisis. "General Korth," Chen began, "I'm Commander Sarah Chen of the Human Deep Space Survey. I'm contacting you to discuss terms for your withdrawal from this system." Korth felt his anger rise at the presumption. "Commander, you seem to be under the mistaken impression that you are in a position to negotiate. My fleet outnumbers your single vessel by more than 40 to 1. Chen smiled, and there was something in that expression that made every Voidborn on the bridge take an involuntary step backward. "General, you've spent the past day fighting humans. Have numbers seemed to matter much so far?" The uncomfortable truth of that statement settled over the Voidborn command crew like a cold shadow. Their overwhelming numerical advantage had proven meaningless against an enemy that refused to acknowledge mathematical realities. Human forces had somehow multiplied their effectiveness through sheer determination and tactical innovation. "What exactly are you proposing, Commander?" Korth asked through gritted teeth. "Simple terms, General. You withdraw your forces from this system immediately and leave the Zephyrians in peace. In exchange, we allow your fleet to depart without further interference." "And if I refuse?" Chen's expression hardened. "Then we stop holding back and you discover why the galaxy classifies Earth as a death world." The implication behind those words sent a chill through the Voidborn leadership. Everything they had seen from the humans so far had been them operating with restraint, trying to minimize casualties while protecting civilians. The idea that they had been deliberately limiting their destructive capabilities was terrifying. Before Korth could respond, proximity alarms began blaring throughout his flagship. The tactical displays showed multiple new contacts dropping out of hyperspace throughout the system. Admiral Torres of the Human Defense Force had arrived with a full battle fleet, responding to Commander Chen's emergency signal. The HSV Liberator, Defender, and Justice took positions around the Wanderer, their weapon systems powered but not yet targeting the Voidborn fleet. Admiral Torres appeared on the communication channel alongside Commander Chen, her presence adding weight to the negotiation. "General Korth," Torres spoke with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "You now face the choice that many aggressive species have faced when they encountered humanity. You can withdraw peacefully and live to learn from this experience, or you can continue this conflict and discover why most of the galaxy fears to wake the sleeping giant." Ambassador Lyrix watched the confrontation from the refugee processing center aboard the Wanderer. Around her, Thousands of her people were being cared for by human medical teams with a gentleness that seemed at odds with their fearsome reputation. The same beings who had fought with such devastating effectiveness against the Voidborn showed infinite patience with frightened Zephyrian children. Dr. Martinez approached Lyrics with a tablet containing the final evacuation statistics. Ambassador, we've successfully relocated 47,000 of your people to safety. The temporary habitats we've constructed can sustain them indefinitely while you decide on permanent relocation options. Lyrics studied the numbers with amazement. Doctor, this evacuation should have been impossible. Our people cannot survive in the conditions created by warfare, yet you managed to move nearly our entire population to safety. Martinez smiled. Ambassador, humans have been conducting disaster relief and emergency evacuations for thousands of years. We've learned to work in conditions that would stop other species cold. But why? Lyrics asked. Your species had no obligation to risk so much for strangers. Your databases must have shown how dangerous this intervention would be. That's exactly why we came, Martinez replied. When someone needs help and everyone else is too afraid to provide it, that's when humans step forward. It's not about obligation or reward. It's about doing what's right because it's right. On the Voidborn flagship, General Korth faced the most difficult decision of his military career. His tactical analysis showed that the human fleet was significantly smaller than his own force, but every piece of intelligence he had gathered suggested that raw numbers were meaningless when fighting these Deathworld beings. They operated according to principles that made conventional military planning irrelevant. General, Commander Vex reported, long-range sensors are detecting additional human vessels approaching from multiple vectors. It appears that word of this conflict has spread through their communication networks. Korth studied the sensor data with growing alarm. Human ships were converging on the Zephyrian system from across their space, abandoning their original missions to respond to the crisis. This was not a coordinated military response, but something far more dangerous. A spontaneous uprising of an entire species that had decided the Voidborn Empire had crossed an unacceptable line. The communication channel reactivated, showing Admiral Torres alongside Commander Chen and now several other human officers. General Korth, Torres announced, you have 5 minutes to begin withdrawing your forces. After that, we will consider your continued presence an act of war against the human species. The weight of that threat settled over the Voidborn command crew. They had spent decades conquering peaceful civilizations that submitted when faced with overwhelming force. Now they faced beings who became more dangerous when threatened, who treated impossible odds as personal challenges, who would fight to the death for principles they had never been asked to explain. General, Commander Vex said quietly, our intelligence files contain references to something called the Geneva Conventions that humans developed to limit their own destructive capabilities during warfare. Sir, if they needed such restrictions for fighting each other, what does that suggest about their capacity for total war? Korth made his decision with the bitter knowledge that it was the only choice that offered his empire a future. All ships, this is the General. Begin immediate withdrawal from the Zephyrian system. Set course for the Outer Rim. As the Voidborn fleet began its retreat, word of the confrontation spread throughout the galaxy via quantum communication networks. The story that emerged challenged everything that civilized species thought they knew about the beings from the Deathworld called Earth. The peaceful Altarians, who had refused to help the Zephyrians due to fear of Voidborn retaliation, received detailed reports of how a single human exploration vessel had not only evacuated an entire civilization but forced a galactic empire to retreat. The logical response should have been to classify humans as an even greater threat than the Voidborn. Instead, something unprecedented happened across the galaxy. Species that had lived in fear of aggressive empires began to whisper about the possibility of protection. The Gentle Consortium, a trading alliance of pacifist worlds, sent quiet diplomatic inquiries about potential defensive agreements with humanity. The scholarly collective, Keepers of Galactic Knowledge, began compiling detailed studies of human intervention patterns throughout their history. What they discovered transformed galactic understanding of the Deathworld species. Humans had a consistent pattern of protecting weaker groups from stronger aggressors, often at tremendous cost to themselves. They had fought wars to end slavery, risked their lives to save strangers from natural disasters, and repeatedly chosen principles over profit when faced with moral decisions. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, the human xenosociologist attached to Admiral Torres's fleet, found herself inundated with requests for interviews from galactic media outlets. The questions always followed the same pattern. Why had humans risked everything for strangers? What did they hope to gain? How could a species capable of such violence also show such compassion? The answer is actually quite simple, Dr. Warren explained during a broadcast to the Galactic News Network. Humans are social creatures who evolved in an environment where cooperation meant survival. We learned millions of years ago that protecting the group, even at personal cost, was essential for the species' continued existence. Those instincts didn't disappear when we developed technology. Ambassador Lyrics participated in the same broadcast, sharing her perspective on the human rescue operation. I have studied thousands of species in my diplomatic career, she said, her crystalline form pulsing with soft light. I have never encountered beings who combine such devastating military capabilities with such genuine compassion. The humans who fought to save my people showed more concern for our well-being than some of our own allies. The interview sparked galaxy-wide discussions about the nature of civilization and strength. For millennia, galactic society had operated on the assumption that military power and moral behavior were incompatible. Species were either strong enough to defend themselves or peaceful enough to deserve protection, never both. Humans had shattered that paradigm by demonstrating that true strength came from choosing to protect others even when you could easily dominate them. They had turned the entire concept of Deathworld species on its head by showing that evolving in harsh conditions could produce protectors rather than predators. 6 months after the Zephyrian rescue, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session to discuss the human question. Representatives from over 200 species gathered to debate how to integrate these unpredictable Deathworlders into galactic civilization. Chancellor Mirren of the Zephyrian Republic spoke first, her crystalline form radiating gratitude. Honored delegates, 6 months ago my species faced extinction. Every member of this council received our distress calls. Every single one found reasons to ignore our pleas for help. Only the humans, whom we had never met and who had nothing to gain from intervention, crossed the galaxy to save us. The chamber fell silent as the implications of her words settled over the assembled representatives. They had all made the same calculated decision to abandon the Zephyrians to their fate, prioritizing their own safety over moral obligations. Today, Chancellor Mirren continued, my people are rebuilding our civilization with human assistance. They ask for no payment, no territory, no political concessions. They help because helping is what humans do. I submit to this council that we have spent centuries fearing the wrong species. The Honorable Kex of the Peaceful Trading Federation stood to address the chamber. With respect to our Zephyrian colleagues, the humans' capacity for violence remains a legitimate concern. Our analysis of their historical records shows over 5,000 years of continuous warfare. They have weaponized everything from basic tools to microscopic organisms. Dr. Warren, attending as an observer, requested permission to respond. Honorable Kex, you are correct that humans have a violent history, but you're missing the crucial context. We fought wars to end slavery, to stop genocides, to protect the innocent from oppression. Our capacity for violence has always been directed toward protecting those who cannot protect themselves. And who decides who needs protection? Challenged Ambassador Tex of the Dominion Worlds. What prevents humanity from declaring other species in need of your intervention whether they want it or not? Admiral Torres stepped forward to address that concern. Ambassador, the answer lies in our fundamental philosophy. Humans have a saying, with great power comes great responsibility. We don't seek to control other species. We seek to ensure that no species suffers what the Zephyrians nearly suffered. The debate continued for days, but the outcome was inevitable. Too many species had been living in fear of aggressive empires like the Voidborn. Too many civilizations had fallen because no one was willing to stand up to bullies. The humans offered something that had never existed in galactic history: protection without conquest, strength without oppression. The final vote to grant humanity full membership in the Galactic Council was unanimous. But more importantly, it came with an unprecedented request. 73 species formally petitioned to enter into mutual defense agreements with humanity, asking the Deathworld beings to serve as protectors of galactic peace. Commander Chen, now promoted to Admiral and appointed as humanity's first Galactic Council representative, addressed the chamber during the historic ceremony. Honored delegates, humanity accepts the responsibility you have placed upon us. We pledge that no species under our protection will suffer conquest or oppression. We pledge that our strength will be used only to defend those who cannot defend themselves. She paused, looking around the chamber at representatives of species that had once feared to contact her homeworld. But understand this, protection is a partnership, not charity. We expect our allies to stand with us in defending the innocent, to contribute their unique capabilities to the common defense, and to reject the philosophy that might makes right. The ceremony concluded with the signing of the Galactic Protection Accords, establishing humanity as the galaxy's unofficial police force. But the real change was deeper than any legal document could capture. For the first time in galactic history, peaceful species had hope that they could remain peaceful without becoming victims. 5 years later, Ambassador Lyric stood in the rebuilt crystal spires of New Zephyria, watching her people perform their daily harmony ritual. The city was more beautiful than ever, incorporating human architectural principles that made it both aesthetically pleasing and defensible. In the distance, she could see the human defense station that guaranteed her world's security. A message arrived from the Galactic Council, reporting another species under attack by aggressive neighbors. This time, the response was immediate and overwhelming. 17 species contributed ships, supplies, and personnel to the rescue operation. The humans led the mission, but they were no longer alone in their commitment to protecting the innocent. The galaxy had learned the most important lesson in its history. Never send an SOS to Deathworlders unless you're prepared for them to actually answer. Because once they do, they don't just save you from immediate danger. They save you from a universe where might makes right, where the strong prey upon the weak, where peaceful beings must choose between defenselessness and militarization. The humans had brought something to the galaxy that was more powerful than any weapon or technology. The idea that civilization meant protecting those who could not protect themselves. They had shown that true strength was not the ability to conquer others, but the courage to stand between innocent people and those who would harm them. And across the galaxy, species that had lived in fear for millennia began to sleep peacefully, knowing that somewhere among the stars, the guardians from the death world were watching over them all. The message that went out from every peaceful world to every corner of galactic civilization was simple. If you're in trouble, if you're facing impossible odds, if evil threatens to triumph over good, send an SOS to the Deathworlders. They will come. They always come. And when they do, everything changes forever.